welcome to Virtual Concert Hall's live music channel. We're back. My name is Chris Au, and I have with me the co-founder of Virtual Concert Halls, Dr. Anna Ouspenskaya.
Chris, hello, thank you, and hello everyone. It's a great pleasure to be back and hosting this program again.
Yes, absolutely. We are at part 4 of the documentary of Beethoven's Symphony No. 1, written and narrated by Lawrence Rapchak, created by New Media Productions Worldwide and Virtual Concert Halls, and this is produced by the Architects of Music.
And as always, people often ask us what drives all of this production, and the answer is simple: our passion to connecting musicians and audiences in live events and music programs from around the globe.
The second movement is the traditional slow movement of the symphony, and it's written in a sort of gallant rococo style, the pleasant, easy listening that was preferred by the nobility of the classical era. No need for Beethoven to go against the grain too much at this point in his career. The second movement is an andante. It moves along in a rather genteel, breezy, rather brisk way in this performance, you'll hear. It's in a moderate triple meter with 3 beats to the measure, and it's in the key of F major, which is now the tonic, the main key of this movement. And you'll hear the first theme start unaccompanied in the second violins, and then you'll hear the violas and celli enter like so. And did you hear what Beethoven did there? The second violin started with the theme in the tonic key, the key of F major, unaccompanied. Then the violas and celli entered in C major, which is the dominant key. As the violins went on to play against them. Then there was a brief link, and we returned to F major as the violins and woodwinds took up the melody. If this sounds familiar, it should. It's the exact same format that we saw in the fugue that we discussed in Dvorak. But Beethoven's second movement is not a fugue, but he uses the standard fugal technique to introduce his main theme. Here it is again, and I'll call it out. The theme alone in the second violins. Now the violas and cellos enter in the dominant key of C with the theme. Here's a brief transition. And now the theme in F major, the tonic key with the full orchestra. But now, as things progress, we notice more interesting features. The theme you've just heard cadences in C major. That's the dominant key of F. And a new theme is heard now, also very graceful and charming, and also in C major. And this leads to a bridge passage, which sounds like a little military fanfare. And finally, another theme in C major, very delicate, with the timpani, the kettle drums, used in a very unusual way to delineate the rhythm in the violin and flute. The bum, ba bum, ba bum, bum. And the first section of the movement closes in the dominant key of C. Sounds to me exactly like the exposition of a sonata. And that's what this second movement is. The first theme, in the tonic key of F major, but here fancied up a bit as a fugato, a little fugue. A move to the dominant key of C major, where we heard the second group of themes, 3 of them, including that little military thing. And we close the section in the key of C, exactly as in the standard sonata exposition. But something else really fascinating is happening here. That second theme, the graceful one, this one, is built on a 2-note motive. 1, 2, 1, 2, which is the same prominent motive from the main theme. Again, a motivic cohesion or unity here. And as we now continue into what must be a central development section, Beethoven uses that little 2-note motive, ba-dum, ba-dum, to seamlessly move us into the remote key of D flat major, like so. And that timpani rhythm that we heard a while ago, bum, ba bum, ba bum, now takes over the entire orchestra. And these 2 motives, the little 2-note motive and that clipped timpani rhythm, bum, ba bum, ba bum, they are it. The entire development section consists of just these 2 things. And hear how he compressed the 2-note motive. And the music moved back to the tonic key of F major. And the recapitulation is upon us. I should also point out that that timpani rhythm motive, bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum, is based on the 3rd measure of the main theme. Yes, that rhythm. And you heard it prominently there as we were arriving back in F major. And the recapitulation now is essentially the exposition repeated, but we stay in the tonic key of F major. But notice how Beethoven is now writing in a true symphonic way by using those 2 little motives. The first 2 notes, and the timpani rhythm. Bum, ba, bum, bum. He uses these 2 seemingly insignificant little trifles to build the entire movement, brick by brick, as it were. This is very significant. Beethoven using this complex method he inherited from Haydn to construct this deceptively simple Rococo-ish diversion. Beethoven may have been playing it safe to a degree in this work, but he was acquiring total control of his music and his destiny as a composer.
Wow. So good to hear Larry's explanations again. It's really comes down to this little, what he says, building an entire movement brick by brick, and you get to see these little bricks emerge and just develop.
Yeah, that's right. It's like looking at a magnificent building built by a genius architect, and then having someone giving you a tour of how everything interlocks in there to make it that good.
Yeah.
And with that in light, I want us to maybe explore a question, which I always had, especially as a student. And I have a couple of answers, but I want to hear yours first. In this symphony and in many other works, Beethoven obviously is using all very standard and very common compositional techniques. Doesn't he? Yet, being musicians, of course, most of us are, if not all of us, are able to recognize within a few seconds that the piece presented is by Beethoven and not by Haydn or not by Mozart and not by Clementi, not by any one of the other contemporaries to the Beethoven, but by Beethoven, even if we don't know the piece. Now, the most amazing thing, I always had that question, especially about Beethoven, but other composers too. But I like to ask people questions. So I ask that question of people who are not professional musicians. Are you able to recognize if this is Beethoven or not? Of course, it's a more simple question. Who is this composer? Like quizzing people on that is harder. But if you play something and do you think it's Beethoven or not? And a lot of times, people who are not familiar intimately with compositional technique and all that stuff, they still can immediately pinpoint. I think that's Beethoven. So, what do you think? How does that happen? Especially in the first symphony, that's kind of subtle and hard to find.
It's hard. I mean, I think this second movement I would not attribute immediately to something that's Beethoven in first listening. There are some things that make you think of it, the way he uses rhythm, the way he cadences. He really likes this idea of repeating the dominant chord, or even if you resolve the tonic, to repeat that a lot as if to establish it, and then he kind of moves on and uses one note from that tonic to lead into something else. So there are signs of his, but I think in this, just as Lawrence Rapchak says, it's this sort of he's playing a little safe, I would say. It's a rococo kind of diversion. It's safe, but he's still in complete control of what he's doing, and because of the fact that a lot of his early works is sort of hinting and with a gentle nudge towards Haydn, this father of the symphonic genre. I think he was still wrapping his mind around it and working with that. But it's not immediate. My answer to your question right now is that it's not immediate. It's almost as if it's there's little clues, but later on, I think you see him really acquire that, especially when he uses the way he uses sforzandi. I think the way he uses accents and sforzandi is unique to him, and it's a way to emphasize to. And usually the sforzandi are written in consecutive. There's like 3 in a row, and
that's right.
It's meant to signify not just an accent, but a kind of crescendo, a kind of a Gothic accent, a way of really holding back something so it doesn't just flow. There's a bit of a resistance, and this idea of resistance, pushing and pulling, I think is also very unique to Beethoven. This idea of something stretching and growing, and there's a bit of resistance before it finally launches, is very unique to Beethoven, which I think later symphonic writers would imitate and use very often. You get this in Brahms, you get this in Tchaikovsky, you get this in the symphonies of Mahler as well. This idea that something's building gradually and there's other things that supplement it, and the dominant is stretched in a way. But that's hard to really ascertain because we're living
in this particular movement. I have a specific measure in which. Even if I didn't know that this piece at all, if I heard it for the first time, there's a specific moment at which I would be left with no doubt this is Beethoven. Do you have that?
Okay.
You don't have that? I'm asking you a question.
I don't know. I can't.
No,
I can't.
you
knowing
can't,
it.
Interesting.
No, can you?
Well, now I know.
yours?
I know the symphony, but even if I didn't,
The second movement. You're talking about the second movement.
Just the second.
Yeah.
The second movement is would be the hardest to identify because it's just so standard, right? And it's so seemingly, conventional to the period and everything. But there's one moment in there where he goes to the D flat major. Which is no big deal either, it's lots of composers.
Generally speaking, right?
Generally speaking. But the way he goes in there, and then the way he adds that timpani on the very low register,
Right.
the way he stretches the registers, all of a sudden, just like you said, something was brewing, and then explosively expands into that unusual key. And, even in the score, you see very thin score, and then suddenly it's the entire orchestra doing that D flat major, and then timpani starts taking over with the rhythm. I think that's a signature of Beethoven. And even if you don't know how it's constructed, the way Larry points out to those pieces is like, I can envision it. Like I'm standing in front of, you know, Sistine Chapel. And
Right.
someone tells me, okay, this is Michelangelo's signature stroke of
Right.
paintbrush, and I would immediately go latch onto that, and I would feel, yes, that's it.
Well, I agree. Like thinking back, it's not in the theme, but it's in the way he develops it, where sometimes all of a sudden he's in C minor, and then through that, it's sort of like the genesis for all this other, like you said, going to D flat major and all that. And it's very brief. It's not as if it stays there for long, but it's just enough so that you know that's his trademark.
Yeah, it's almost like he comes in and says, "Okay, guys, enough
Yeah.
of this. I'm putting my signature on the piece."
Right. Wow. I have a question for you as well.
Yeah.
Like, what, in terms of when you're listening to it, when you listen to Beethoven and you hear that, oh, this is so him, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel as if you're in familiar territory, or do you feel like, oh, it's this, what is the emotion you attach with knowing this is Beethoven's music?
Oh, that's interesting. That's a really good question, and I think it would be personal. I wouldn't generalize that it's
But for
anyone else.
like
Yeah,
when you
it's
listen to, oh, this is,
yeah,
is it strength? Is it a mark of strength? Is it a mark of, what is it? What do you think it gives to you? And then there's many moments in this kind of thing that make you think of
yeah,
it. But
yeah. I know what you mean. I think I understand your question. It's the sense of recognition, and well, everybody has, their favorite composers, not favorite. I just have different relationships with the composers, and some are, more detached, more distant, and some are more intimate, and all of that. To me, composer as a whole output almost signifies a person who wrote out all of
yeah,
that stuff.
yeah.
So I understand they're dead, but for me they're not quite dead. The composers, they're
No,
almost
no.
very much alive, like people. So when and Beethoven, among maybe half a dozen composers with whose music I identify, it's part of my personality. There are some composers I admire, love to perform, but they're less of my own personality. And
Right.
Beethoven is one of them, closer to my skin. So, like the emotion you're talking about, okay, let's say I randomly turn on some recording and it's Beethoven being played. Even if I'm too busy to listen, I still feel that immediate homecoming. Oh, that's part of me coming back. It's
Yeah.
the recognizing a very familiar face, almost like seeing a
Yeah.
family member coming back
Yeah.
home from work, something like that. It's a very comforting. I mean, Beethoven is not a comforting composer,
Yeah.
but for me to hear his music is very familiar and a very my own experience, because that's just such a significant part of my own personality. His music, I don't know him as a person, probably not, but
Yeah.
his music
But
definitely.
you do recognize in a way through this recognition that there are some composers where you feel that there's more fragility in their way in their expression, or there's certain things that, for example, when I think of where I compare Schubert to Beethoven, there's a different level of strength in terms of the way they want to resolve, or they want to end a piece of music, or they want to, and I think these are personalities. These are certain things which make them who they are. But I think for me, Beethoven signifies this absolute strength, and rhythm is so integral in the way he builds. I mean, this melody he writes, it's not particularly that revolutionary, but it's the rhythm in which he does it, and then the second thing, the timpani, in which he uses rhythm, and then the orchestra plays the same rhythm and intensifies. I think that's the way he kind of builds, like he says, brick by brick, and it's really that makes the piece. Otherwise, it's not a very luscious melody. And I think even for Beethoven, this second movement doesn't really represent him at his most perhaps lyrical, or him at his most indulgent perhaps, or searching. There's some movements that are very transcendental and he's searching for something, or he has some melody which he, portrays. And this one is just this very light, and he's just getting there. He's swimming around the waters of what he learned from the past and figuring out his own language through that too.
Oh yeah, I agree completely. And my opinion, I mean, not to criticize the genius Beethoven, but if there's anything which is not his strength, not to say that he was lacking it, but he wasn't. But it's not the most intricate part of his writing is melody. His melodies are very laconic throughout his life, except like what you said in the late period, he was trying to explore more into the melodies, but it seems like he would venture into more sophisticated melodic writing, but then revert back to simple C major arpeggios, like his Sonata number 32.
Yeah.
There's an attempt at a more complex melody, but it's not his nature of his writing. It's the development, it's the rhythm, it's the contrast, and so forth. And yeah, his melodies sometimes are very transcendent, but they're all, to me at least, I think they only appear so because of the context they are put into. If you just take a Beethoven's melody, it'll probably be more like a village, simple folk song.
But it's what he does with it rhythmically and harmonically, right, and how he uses that to kind of. And I think that's what the genius of it. I guess it's not maybe the first thing he thinks of when constructing a piece, but it is something that he uses obviously to get you to find it familiar, and that's what he, I think, arguably does with his theme and variations that is very, very incredible. The reason why the Diabelli variation, the Eroica variations, and the C minor, it's way, okay, I'm happy with that melody, that's fine. But it's what I do with it, is what I transform with it. And I think that's absolute, his genius, I think.
Yeah, his genius is definitely in development. And that's what Larry's lectures are so eye-opening. Because he finds that he goes backwards from seeing the score deeper into that score, and he finds where each element comes from. And it's not accidental, of course. It's preconceived and constructed and artfully developed by Beethoven. And that's what he worked his best with, taking something like a single tiny rudiment of a rhythm and making it significant enough to have really strong emotional impact and strong driven part of the plot of the story. He's a storyteller.
I agree, and I think this is we've mentioned this quite a few times throughout the shows, because I think this is really apparent in Beethoven's music, but I also think it's very applicable to our lives. And before I thank the team and our collaborators, I think this is what we do, which is start off with very simple projects of like, let's just live stream, let's just get things going, and then it builds from there, and we get other people involved, and there's panel discussions, broadcasts, and we have different things, but it's interview plus music plus judges and everything. And I think that's what's really quite wonderful about his inspiration. And so with that, I mean, I want to give a big thanks to our team, right? Our collaborators, New Media Productions, Virtual Concert Halls, Architects of Music, and of course the incredible narration of Lawrence Rapchak. I never tire of hearing how he thinks about music, and I think it's just fantastic that we have him as part of the show and part of our series.
And I want to invite everyone, please check out many different programs. We take the best from Beethoven's approach to architecture, and just like Chris pointed out, we take an element and we develop it, and then it becomes gradually, all those developed elements become a huge symphony or a big tree with many leaves and branches. And please check out the line of productions, Music and Musicians Around the Globe, where we, like Chris said, we interview a variety of people related to the music world, performers, teachers, and everyone. And when you see those programs, the picture of who the people are, how they work, and how this whole field works becomes more clear, and helps with giving you tools on how to live in that industry, in that world, and in those relations, to the best benefit of yourself and your art. And
absolutely.
lots of ongoing, current, and upcoming events. We have concerts, we have broadcasts of symphony orchestra events and competitions and everything. You see on the screen, the websites are being shown. Please visit those websites and have a little bit of patience. Our projects are very much into development section of the symphony. Excuse me. And therefore, they're kind of complicated. They're not sound bites where you can just, pay 3.5 seconds of attention and understand all of it, because it's just too involved.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes everything exciting. Everything's in development, usually the most exciting, and you don't know how it's going to end or what we're going to do with it. How long we'll be in development for. And
hopefully forever.
Yes, exactly. So thank you for joining us on this part 4 of the Beethoven First Symphony documentary, narrated by Lawrence Rapchak, and I hope to see you next time for part 5 of this Beethoven First Symphony documentary series. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you all very much, and Chris, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Anna.
No matter where you are or who you are, music connects us all. We started with a dream, but now we are paving the future. Welcome to the Sound Expressiva Global Competition. Fully virtual, yet bringing musicians closer together than ever before, now on a global scale. True live, inclusivity, diversity, connection, community, an extraordinary array of judges. Get noticed by companies all over the world. Prizes, scholarships, performance opportunities. Apply to be a part of the most exciting congregation of artists like nothing you've ever seen before. We guarantee quality and leave no musician behind. We can't wait to hear you on the virtual stage.